Welcome to Speaking Influence. And if you have ever had any fears about picking up the phone to make sales calls or knowing what to say or how to get those conversations started with new customers, this is going to be a great opportunity for you to do something about that with someone who has some great expertise in this area. My guest today is Wendy Harris. Wendy is a phone sales trainer. She has over 30 years of experience, over 1 million calls made. She's definitely the person to speak to. She is the host of the Making Conversations Count podcast and a former Beaver leader with the Scouts. So we better make sure that we are ready to beaver away and get into it today. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me on, Johnny. It's great to be here.
It's a real pleasure. Now, this is an area that, whilst I've had some sales conversations and chats on the show, never talked about sales training or sales calls on the show before. So I'm really excited to do that because in terms of the audience for this show, a huge part, if not most of the audience, are probably in business for themselves or having to make sales calls or dread that part of their aspect of their work. And so that's one of the reasons I've been very much looking forward to speaking to you today. Can you, for the audience's benefit, give us a little bit more of insight into what you do and who you do it for?
Okay, I have two kind of clear audiences, and that is that I help corporate teams that are tasked specifically to outreach to customers, and which is great, especially when those individuals are happy to do better and not just be on the training because their boss has said that they've got to have some training, because that usually means that they fear that they're doing something terribly wrong. And of course, it's good to remember that we can continue to tweak and improve all the time. Even I still learn things after 30 odd years. And the other audience that I love working with is owner-managed businesses who know that they need to do this stuff for themselves and would sometimes rather do the accounts than pick up the phone and talk to a stranger.
Yeah.
So it is about helping people shift that attitude and their approach to how they talk to these people that they've never met before.
Yeah, I think most business owners that I know would probably rather sit on a red hot poker than make the sales calls. You know, it is something that people have a lot of fear around and really hate doing, and will almost do anything to try and avoid. Why do you think that is?
Do you know, I think it's because we have been on the receiving end of so many bad examples of somebody trying to flog you something down the phone. And usually when you think of those bad examples, it's because they haven't done their research. You are not in the marketplace or the right person to be speaking to. So why would you ring and try and tell me how wonderful you are without even checking if it's me? A great example is in the B2C world, where you get somebody ring and say, I'm ringing you about that accident that you had in your car. We've all had them.
Yeah.
And my stock response to that now is, oh, you mean the one I died in? It's kind of because I've never been in an accident. They've just got a phone list and they're just ringing everybody. So it's about being smart about who it is that you're wanting to speak to, and that they should really have a need for what it is that you can help solve, whatever problem it is that your service does. Yeah. So if you consider the other options are that we're having to make sales calls, you're not really, you're just kind of looking to introduce yourself and find out about them. And once you can change that approach and change that attitude, then people are more than happy to tell you about themselves.
I think that's it. That inherent resistance does seem to be that we have an expectation that people hate receiving sales calls, because we probably do as well. And like you said, because we have received so many bad ones, how do you start to fix that, Wendy?
I think when you start to unpick it and say, I've got a product or a solution that is going to really help this particular marketplace. So I need to get to the person in that marketplace that would look after choosing that product or service and putting their needs first. And if you consider that you are in a relationship, like taking somebody on a date, you're not going to get married, are you? That first date, it's unlikely.
Yeah.
So it's the same with a sales call. You're not going to ring up and go, buy my stuff. It's the best on the market, because we're going to go, whoa, hang on a minute. We've only just met. I don't know you from Adam. Yes, you probably have interrupted me from 10 billion other things that I need to get done. But if you sort of say, I need to find out about how you do things. Is this something that you're considering already? Have you done it already? What are the thought processes around what we offer? And consider yourself more of an educator and a teacher, then the sales side of things drops away. And it's that persona that you can then become yourself. Right. And you don't need to put on, posh telephone voice or anything like that. You really just need to kind of match and mirror how they speak at their speed, but be yourself as much as you can.
There is this thing, and I guess I've seen it more in online programs and webinars and online event sales and stuff, where maybe in networking as well to some degree, you having a great time, you're teaching, you're sharing great information, and it's a really good thing. And then all the energy shifts. Suddenly you're going into sales mode, then it starts to become a bit icky, a bit horrible. And I think it's like the same kind of thing that you're talking about, of if you go into this with the I'm doing sales mentality, that's pretty much the wrong place to be starting.
Yeah. If you can see the end is that you've helped yet another person fix a problem, then the how you got there kind of falls away.
Yeah.
And if you can put the customer's journey into, an ideology that would be how you would like to be treated, then all of that hard-hitting sales drifts away. All of that arrogance, all of that aggression just melts, because you just want to do a good job. We all just want to be helpful at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Over the last year, I guess people have been at home a lot more. Has that been a good thing when it comes to phone sales, or not so much?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag. And I would say that some companies have had a real awakening that actually to have a phone call means that they're connected with another human being. So they're encouraging giving out mobile numbers, and, they're setting up their telephony a little better these days so that they can just, transfer it out to their mobile. So you're getting people willing to actually answer the phone. Yet there are other companies that are saying, look, because we're struggling with our infrastructure, if you know their direct number and if you have their mobile, reach out to them directly. Otherwise, you've got to resort to other tactics. So it kind of depends on the company and how they want to operate. But in the main, the conversations, when you do get them, are much better.
Yeah, and I would have imagined that to be the case, that you get called up by somebody and you're kind of stuck at home, some people on their own or with not much to do, or maybe having to wrangle the kids as well as everything else that you're supposed to be doing. You work from home, stuff like that. It might be a welcome break to have a bit of connection from the outside world. So,
absolutely.
So yeah, I can appreciate if it's done right and it's done nicely, and it's not some horrible,
yes,
hey, let's talk to you about that accident you had kind of call. Then yeah,
going
to be
emotions have been a bit more extreme. So where tolerance would have been a little bit more, that accident will never happen on a, if you haven't, you're going to be more likely to be a little more aggressive in that that didn't happen to me, because that's one thing that the last few months and or so have taught us, is that time is incredibly precious to us.
Yeah, and rightly so. And anyone who's in sales and anyone who is looking for customers, you must respect their time as much as you do your own. One of the hardest parts with all this, I know, is actually starting the conversations. And I know that you have ways to help people to do that, to get in that right mindset. How do you even begin? What would you say is the right way to start the conversation?
I usually say something along the lines of, "Hey, Johnny, I'm calling from Speaking of Influence. I'd love to introduce what we do here. I know you're all about communication and we've got some great tools that can help with that. How do you communicate at the moment? What sort of tools do you have?" Over to you.
That's a great way to answer it, because I want to answer that question. Yeah. I like that. So it really is being very clear on your purpose for calling and asking a question that hopefully they want to answer.
Yeah. In some instances, I've worked for clients a lot in finance and telecommunications and that sort of thing. And, they're usually heavily, involved in a contract that could be 3 or 5 or 7 years long. So if I was going to introduce myself to you as somebody who's got a 5-year contract, I'd go, "Hey, Johnny, I'd love to introduce what we do around our finance contracts, but I need to find out first and foremost if you've got one in place and how long ago you did that. Because what I'm doing is I'm saying, if you've done it in the last 6 months, we'll come back to you. I'm not going to start trying to tell you all about it today, because you're not going to be interested. Your to-do list and your priorities are going to be so much different." And they'll remember the fact that you didn't try to push that point. And usually then you're invited to get back in touch. But just drop me some details in the meantime, because if it goes wrong, I'll know how to get in touch with you. That's usually the invitation that you get.
Yeah.
So it's just shifting that approach.
Okay. Now, I can remember having some sales trainings where there's been a big focus on mindset. Do you think that's particularly important here? And if it is, what is the right kind of mindset to have?
If you're having a really, really bad day, just don't do it. If you can't sit up in your chair and put your shoulders back and put a smile on your face, even if you've had something else going on, if you can't do that, do go find something else to do. But usually it is about getting into a physical habit of sitting up straight and putting a smile on your face, because already the way that you're talking has taken on a life of its own. It's got that enthusiasm and the passion that you have in what it is that you're doing. And people tend to mirror that. So that mindset is really important in your approach to things, definitely, Johnny.
Yeah. So a lot of what you talk about is primarily to do with over the phone interactions. And so, of course, there are some important parts of communication missing with phone, unless you're on a Zoom call. And even then, it's a bit limited. Body language isn't really there so much. The sort of in-person connection, seeing who you're being able to talk to. So how much does that impact the conversation? And are there things that you do? You talk about people mirroring that. Are there things that you specifically do to aim to get that?
Yeah, I mean, it may or may not be of interest to the watchers, but I'm slightly deaf in this ear because I've had a headset on this ear for many, many years. And in actual fact, your ears are great instruments. The reason that this ear's gone deaf is because it's realised that it needs to put all its effort into listening with this ear. Right. So a lot of the time now I will be on speakerphone because I'm in a private office. I could be on speakerphone because I'm trying to retrain this ear to hear again. So the point that I'm making is that in actual fact, when you only have listening to rely on, you work harder at listening to be able to hear those things. And something that I've written about before is have a Zoom conversation at the beginning of your relationship if that's the way to go, because you'll get a certain amount of body language and tonality from when somebody's speaking to you from Zoom. But when it comes to keeping that relationship going, transfer it to phone, because you already know a lot of that inflection and your brain will be receptive to how they're speaking on the phone.
Yeah.
So I know that that doesn't answer when you're speaking to somebody cold, but what happens over time is, because you practice it, you recognize it even in strangers, what they say and how they say things, to be able to sort of draw them around with just subtleties in how you're speaking.
Yeah. As someone with a great deal of experience in this area, how much of a difference do you think it makes whether the call is warm or cold? Like, if someone like you who knows what you're doing and has great experience, does it just make no difference at all, or is it just that bit easier if it's warmed up first?
Easier or lazier? I'm never quite sure which of the two. Now, of course, I help people and I show them how to use LinkedIn to warm up a connection and take that into the real world to have a conversation. That's because that's in people's comfort zones. For me personally, and that's just because I've been doing it for a very long time, I think if you've got the right attitude and the right approach, then you can speak to people cold. And if your intention is to only introduce yourself and create a best first impression, then you let that customer lead the journey in terms of when the right time is, or when they may next be looking at that project, when the contract's up, the variables are endless. And then all you need to do is make sure that you keep your promise in that follow-up, because you're starting a journey together. You've got to keep on that journey until such time that they do become a customer. Because if you expect it that very first call, you've failed already.
That's good. Good advice. I like it. For those people who maybe feel that they do need a bit more easing in, are there some points that you can share? I know you teach this stuff, but are there a few things that you could share that might be give people a few clues as to how to do that?
In my book, I start with numbers. And if it's something that you've been putting off doing, you're effectively at ground zero. So set yourself a challenge, 1 call a day. By the end of the month, you'll have made 20 calls. You may have made more calls than that because you won't have gotten them the first time that you've tried, but you can at least find out when the best time is to catch them in the office, or how the best way is to get in touch with them.
Yeah.
Now that's 20 more people than you had when you started. So you can start to then build that up. I did a power up session with a chap this week, and he was failing to pick up the phone because he was worried about them answering and what to say. Now, usually it is because the chances are 8 out of 10 times you're going to get voicemail. So leave a message to say, it's nothing important. I was just hoping to catch you for a quick chat. I'll try again. Because if you leave it as just a missed call and you try again as a missed call, you're that salesperson that doesn't want to tell them that you're trying to sell them something.
Right.
So they're more likely to answer the call if they've heard your voicemail message saying, wasn't anything important, I just wanted to chat.
Yeah. And so does that make it more important in the world where in businesses, I guess we tend to still have landlines, although a lot of people don't have them in their homes anymore. I know on mobiles, people won't always answer unrecognized numbers. I know I tend not to myself. Does that become a bit of an issue for doing phone sales?
Yes, but that has been something that's been around for many years, since caller ID. Even on the office phones, that they've had that ability to be able to see who's calling, and it can bring up the customers on their CRM packages and things like that. But I think it's become almost like a second nature habit to screen your calls. So if you're going to be making a call out, that is your first impression. If you don't leave a message, what kind of first impression are you leaving? And that's where I question people and say, would you rather be the missed call where they're going, that's probably somebody trying to sell me something, or, oh, she sounds all right. She doesn't sound threatening. She just wants to have a chat. No harm in that. I know which I prefer.
Yeah, me too. We have here in Spain where I live. I regularly once certain people get hold of your mobile number and the likes that there's certain abuses that are allowed here that I know aren't allowed in the UK, and so I regularly get calls from people pretending, or not even sure if they're pretending, or if they actually are like collection agencies and like they want money, and I know I don't owe them any money, so they're just trying their luck, like your accident people as well, and yet they will always leave messages, but they're always these robocall messages.
Oh yeah, automation has crept into our lives in all corners, hasn't it?
Yeah, and that's, I guess, is an issue as well. Like we talk about people wanting connection and relationship earlier, and automation does not create that. But I know that some of the training that involves in sales calls does involve scripts. How do you do scripted kind of calls in a way that don't end up becoming almost robotic? And I think probably most of us have had that kind of experience of having a conversation with someone who's working from a script and they really do not want to deviate from it no matter what you say to them.
This is where I think a lot of time and effort is missed in making sure that staff have got full product awareness, and also real examples with real customers. And it was funny because I was talking about this on a customer service webinar with the British Library last week, and saying that it was aimed at helping startup businesses. And I was saying that even if you've started up a business, you've got some prior experience.
Yeah.
So you talk about those experiences because you're going to draw on those skills in whatever it is that you're doing. So when you're talking to a customer about how your product or service can help, you've got to be able to relay that story in such a way that they will understand and be able to imagine that being implemented in their own company. So having case studies and testimonials from your customers about how that affected them is a great way for your customers to actually be helping you sell you. Great. And that can be on the phone or, social proof online, in your blogs, on your website, because that's what people want to know is, well, how does it make their customers feel? Will it make me feel that way too?
Yeah. Now, I know a lot of people like to do more social media outreach or email outreach connections, because I guess it feels a bit easier to do. It's not quite so personalized. It's pre-planned out there, but that maybe is part of the problem with it as well. And so many people do it. Things get lost in emails all the time. Everyone's doing social media marketing and stuff online. Phone calls, actually having a conversation with people, actually maybe stands out a bit more now, that other than the people who clearly abuse those systems, people, when you actually do speak to a real person, we don't so often have those phone calls anymore, that perhaps it's something that isn't being used nearly as much as it could be. Do you think there's any truth to that? Is it something that actually can help you to stand out?
Yes, I do think that there is a place for email marketing, because it wouldn't exist otherwise.
Yeah, of course.
It's like everything. We've got to use everything in conjunction with, and you've got to strategize what tools to use and at what time. A conversation has to be the stickiest kind of marketing that I know. Because when somebody asks you a question, who do you know that I could go and book a flight and hotel somewhere? you will remember the conversation before you remember a social media post or an email that you've received or an advert. You know, I would say that adverts on the television, that kind of medium, is probably as powerful as a conversation, because it's kind of the story is being played out to you, isn't it? For you to be able to remember. There's always those hooks.
Yeah, especially if you are a part of it. That's even more hooked in, rather than just absorbing or watching or seeing something. If you are actively a part of it and engaged in it, it's going to be more memorable for you, because that is a part of your active experience in life. So yeah,
Sure.
that makes a lot of sense. Where do people tend to go wrong with this though? I mean, I know there's the hesitancy and the resistance to it, and maybe, you know, we said about going into the sales too soon, but what are the other things that perhaps people struggle with in this area?
Aside from, generally there's a lack of experience, so you tend to find that sales isn't necessarily rewarded financially to the employee, and the employee just needs a job, and until you've cut your teeth, nobody's going to invest in any training on you, because it's just cost them to recruit you. And I think that's a bit of a backwards kind of approach to things. That yes, it may be in a sales environment, but ultimately, if you can set up a culture for people to want to get your product into the right people, helping the right people, then people will do a good job. So partly the salary side of things, partly because sometimes I don't feel that necessarily the sort of C-suite see the importance or remember the importance of what they had to do back in their day, or that the marketplace has changed, things are done differently. I've been doing this since 1989. And I remember the fax coming in, and that was really exciting. We'd all stand in queue to send a fax, when it was much quicker to just pick up the phone and have a conversation. You know, and I've seen email marketing come in. I've seen social media platforms come in. So I think sometimes you're kind of set up to fail almost if you're not careful, because if you don't have the right kind of support, and whilst I train in this, I try to do programs where it's coached, it's mentored, it's supportive, and it's based in the real world, not just me telling you a technique and go and do it. We work together. I don't see that happening enough.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of people are missing a trick and not doing this, where perhaps their businesses could really benefit from it?
Oh, definitely. And I do believe that businesses have the idea that what they do with their marketing will generate, sales, and yes, it should. And sometimes are very reliant on it being an inbound inquiry from their marketing. And they could be just that little bit proactive and turn that into an outreach in a very personal way than a very salesy way.
Yeah. I wonder, do you hear all sorts of excuses from people as to why they don't do it?
Oh yeah, there's all sorts of excuses. I didn't have time because I was on a Zoom. I didn't have time, so I just emailed them. A classic is when the boss says, so on your prospect list, you've got XYZ people that you're saying that are going to come on board. Where are we with that? Oh, well, I haven't heard anything back, so I've emailed them. So why have you not asked a question? There's clearly something that they don't understand and don't feel comfortable in asking the question, because they feel that they should understand it by now. So it's actually just stopping the sale.
That's interesting. I'm curious, what in your opinion, makes people persuasive on sales calls?
Oh, I'm not sure about the persuasive. Yes, I think you do almost have to be persuasive, but I think you have to know, not just believe. You have to know that it's the right thing for your customer. If you win and you get commission, that's a bonus. That's just a byproduct. So that persuasiveness has to come in at a point where it's in the customer's best interest.
Yeah, which is a great way to be thinking about it. Yeah, I certainly encourage people not to think about it just in terms of sales at all costs, which I think is what a lot of people have in mind, but sales for the right product for the right person who needs it is like, it almost isn't really sales, right? I was hearing sales training, sales is service. And if you do it from that sort of perspective, it is finding out what people want, giving people what they want. Those aspects and elements are important. But do you think things like people's phone confidence or their voice have a particular impact on results as well?
Certainly accents can. I know some of the overseas call centres don't do so well. Some really big brands have had their call centres overseas and had to bring them back because customers just couldn't understand the dialect and the transference from their language into trying to speak English. So that certainly has a big impact. There are some accents that people really resonate with. So, if you could just bottle that or get people to speak with that accent, they'd do really well.
What are some of the accents that people resonate with, Wendy?
People love Welsh. They love Yorkshire. Peaky Blinders brought back the Black Country accent. So yeah, it just you'll hear that some people will say that Liverpool, the Scouse accent is a little bit harsh on the ears, but then other people will say that they actually love it. And I think it's when you start to listen to people that they almost sing when they're talking, and that's what people sort of tap into. I think that's where that human connection happens.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. I'm from the north originally. I was born in Manchester, but I lost my accent a long time ago. But it can come back if I talk to the right people. It comes back very quickly. And all my family are from Liverpool, Merseyside area. But I get the Welsh thing. It's a very sing-songy accent. It's very nice to listen to, and even Yorkshire as well has some elements of that as well. So I can see why those perhaps appealing accents from the range of UK accents out there. But south of the country tends to be a bit flatter, a bit less vocal variety, as we'd say in Toastmasters clubs. It's interesting how that goes. Okay, fascinating.
I've worked with a team as well where they've had a male account manager and a few female account managers. The one female was very quiet. She was just a bit shy, but she was very sure about when she was talking about things, and that was fine. And the male account manager, he was quite how can I put it, showmanship. He would stand and his arms would be going at his desk and things. And we had this conversation that just happened about how they've got certain accounts that they're supposed to look after, and so they're given a pocket here and there. And it came about that this one, the chap sort of said, some I just don't seem to get anywhere with. And what he was pointing out was that it was the personality types that went opposite to him that were a bit quieter and surer. And the lady in the team said, and I sometimes struggle with the ones that are just like quick fire. And I went, well, there's an obvious solution. You just swap accounts and give each other the opportunity to win to your strengths. And that's what they did. And they started swapping accounts left, right and centre. And of course, their sales conversions went up.
That's a good point. It's interesting then, if you are a one-man, one-woman, one-person business and you have no choice but to do all the sales calls yourself, but you are a particular personality type that works well with people who are more that kind of personality type, how can you create better rapport with people who aren't, if you don't have the luxury of handing over those calls to someone who's perhaps more suitable?
This may not be what people want to hear, but people tend to buy from people. So if you can do absolutely everything you can to show that you are honest and authentic and genuine, then after that point, you're not going to win everybody anyway. So it's likely that you will start to identify a particular target audience. And so instead of looking to sort of scattergun your approach and speaking to everybody, that you actually get a little bit more targeted and you focus on the types of business that naturally have those types of personalities attached to them. And you will find that in any business.
What would you think about something like maybe gets taught in your linguistic programming trainings, where they might tell you more to focus on matching and mirroring like the tonality, the tempo, the pitch of the voice, things like that? Do you think that could make any difference, or is that maybe a bit actually not so much?
Yes, definitely. And I think I probably take it for granted that I do all of those things anyway, because I've been doing it for so long, that, you know, anybody that you're talking to, if they're excitable and they're talking very quickly, then you start talking very quickly with them and you get very excited too. So you've got to kind of almost allow yourself to be in the moment of that conversation and let yourself be carried along by how they are leading. And if they're just sat back and they're kind of like, yes, then you be self-assured and going, okay, well, that's what we'll do there. You know, so I think you do that automatically, but you probably haven't noticed that you do it. And if you haven't noticed that you do it, start to take more notice and you'll get better at it. It's like anything. If you don't do it, you're not going to be practicing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the whole reasons why I pick up accents so quickly of people, is that I do that without necessarily noticing it, and I hopefully never do it to a point where somebody thinks I'm making a joke or anything like that. I just have a tendency to pick up strong accents from other people, and especially if they're from the north of England. It's a very easy one for me to fall into. But you know, things like, you're right, matching and mirroring the tempo, the pitch, the style of the conversation is something probably most of us do anyway. It's like natural empathy and rapport skills that we build up with people. But if you're not doing that, or if you're just going in like all guns blazing or always super calm, it could be good to have a bit of a play with adjusting your communication style and having that awareness of, maybe I can match and mirror a bit more of the person I'm speaking to.
Yes, yeah.
That's interesting. This is really fascinating stuff.
There's a lot of psychology that goes in behind just making that good first impression, isn't there?
There really is. There really is. Now, I know you have a podcast as well. We mentioned earlier it's called Making Conversations Count. What do you generally talk about in your podcast?
I like to invite business leaders who have, to all intents and purposes, become experts at what they do. And they talk a little bit about what they do. But the main point of the show is for them to share one conversation that has created a turning point for them. And the vulnerability that comes from them having to think back to that conversation, and sometimes we've got more than one, and what happened next, is kind of an eye-opener that we're all human and we all have adversity to overcome. And it's the power of having a conversation that can almost sort of cement what I'm going to do next. Because I've said it out loud, it's real. Now I can tackle that challenging situation. And I've had all sorts of pivotal moments, if you like, from guests talking about baby loss, their sister being murdered, you know, and all of these sorts of challenges are kind of hidden from the business perception and what they put out as an impression, but they've all been through something. And as we all have had a story that has affected us quite deeply, and they trust to tell me all about it to help people that may be feeling the same.
Great. That sounds like a great show, and well worth checking out. You mentioned you have a book as well, and I'm guessing that's maybe more along the sales call training.
Yes, it is. It's what I have been teaching for many years. It's a lot of what I do in my Power Up one-to-ones. It's everything that I could get out of my brain to help people to make a start without actually being in front of them. So it's kind of the DIY version of my training.
Okay, and the book's called
Making Conversations Count.
There you go. So you've got some solid branding there.
Absolutely. Original thinking.
Keep it all the same thing. People know who that is then and what you're about.
Yes.
What about if somebody would like to get in touch with you? Maybe they would like some sales training for themselves, or perhaps they have a team that they think, oh, Wendy, you clearly know your stuff. I need you to come and help my team. How can people get in touch with you?
They'll find me hanging out on LinkedIn most days. I'm Wendy Harris. That's my handle there. You can look at the website. That's allthews.wagassociates.com. But please just pick up the phone. Let's just have a chin wag, and because you never know where a conversation will lead.
Yeah. You know you're not going to get rejected if you give Wendy a call. you might even get a few handy pointers on how to do it. Well, that's really fantastic. So your own book is going to be a great resource for people to check out to get more information about this. Are there any other books or resources that you would recommend people who might be wanting to learn more about this to check out?
Yes, definitely. There's I have a take the telephone influence test. It's makingconversationscount.scorecards.com, I think. But if you just message me, I'll send you the link. Once you've completed that test, I will send you by email all my tips by download. It's in a PDF version. You can have it for free, and you can, do your worst with it.
Well, I'll make sure when this comes out as a podcast episode, I'll make sure that the links that are in the show notes for that and for your course and for your LinkedIn profile as well, so people can come and connect with you.
Thank you, Johnny.
Before we finish up for today, is there anything you'd like to leave people with as closing words?
What would happen if you didn't pick up the phone in your business?
A great question to leave people to think about, Wendy. It has been an absolute delight to speak to you. I've learned a lot. I hope that people watching and listening have learned a lot from this too. And please go and check out Wendy, check out Making Conversations Count, check out the podcast. And thank you for joining us today. Wendy, thank you so much for being my guest. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much, Johnny. Appreciate your time.